We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
From FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 26th of September, 2020, as we once again document the crisis of our republic, the undermining of our national, state, and individual autonomy. And we are approaching Election Day, and what the left would refer to as Revolution Day, ladies and gentlemen, as they are planning a revolution against the outcome of the election as long as it isn't Joe Biden. We have 38 more days to go before the election, and it is a very worrying scenario to think that for political purposes you have a group of people that will take down the entire country, that will destroy the entire nation, all of our history, all of our freedom, everything down the toilet, because they don't get their way. They don't get their political outcome that they want. Instead of waiting patiently for the next chance. No, they're so lusting for power that they have to take down everything and destroy everything that the Founding Fathers built and that the American people built. These are unprecedented times in American history, and I'm afraid it is very apparent that some of our key institutions are in on the conspiracy to destroy our nation. You know, you have what's commonly referred to as the deep state, and they are doing everything they can. I think they're all in with the left to destroy our nation, and the American people are, I think they're a lot wiser than they used to be, but is it too little too late? That's the question. Hey, good morning, Vicky.
Good morning. Actually, I think, we should say that this is the billionaires' war because they're funding it. And they're the ones that stand to benefit from the destruction of our country. And the people at street level that are rioting, they really are just useful idiots.
Right. Yeah.
So
useful idiots, but very dangerous idiots.
Oh, yeah, definitely very dangerous. But still, they are just being used as a tool for the billionaires.
You know, I was thinking last night as I was trying to sleep, and we have some audio to play from the McCloskeys later on in the show, but that scenario they went through was terrifying. I mean, it was profoundly terrifying in so many different ways. And it's actually, to hear them describe it, it's even worse than you originally think. I think most people who are decent people, who just are living their lives, they're not disrupting anybody, they're going about their daily business, can imagine a mob of people in their yard trying to get to their house, trying to destroy everything they have, and them standing out. And the only thing standing in their way is themselves, the homeowner with the gun. Maybe the spouse, and you know that that's the only thing standing between you and a mob of people, is just this firearm. There's no authorities anywhere around, no police, no first responders. It's just you, the mob, and your little tiny weapon. And I don't care what kind of weapon you have. In a situation like that, your weapon looks pretty tiny. You know, and as I was thinking about this last night, how just incredibly terrifying this situation is.
Right, and you know what Darren is talking about is that there's an interview that Rudy Giuliani did with the McCluskeys where they basically told their whole story. One of the things that they revealed was that there was an undercover cop embedded with the rioters.
Oh yeah, that's right. Maybe I should just play that now. I don't have that particular part of it. I tried to cut down as much. These clips are a little bit long.
I do that all the time because I actually want to clip the whole thing.
Well, it's, if you want people to appreciate the story, so you cut out as much of the banter as possible while keeping the meat and potatoes. I've been editing for, professionally for years. And so I after a while you get a little, hopefully good at it, but it's sometimes excruciating to decide whether or not you want to keep certain things, because especially when the subject matter, there's some of these things with the think tanks like, yeah, okay, that's, the whole thing you can pretty much scrap except for what you went in there for. But but some of it is so important that you just, oh man, it's agonizing because you want to play the whole thing, but you can't put the whole thing on the air, on your show, because you might as well tell people to just go listen to the real thing or play the whole thing uncut, But in this case, it was one of those interviews. It was just so riveting to see what these people went through. It's mind blowing. So I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and play this. This is Rudy Giuliani and Patty, and what was the guy's name again? Do you remember? I
don't.
I'll look it up.
Charles, or I don't remember.
I'll look it up. But anyway, everybody's going to remember this as the couple who's in Missouri, the Missouri couple, who was confronted with the Black Lives Matter / Antifa mob. I don't know if the mob identified itself one way or the other. I think they were Black Lives Matter.
I think they were, yes.
Yeah. And they were out in front of, they came through their gate, broke their gate, came in, and were about to destroy their home. And, for standing in front of the home, defending their home, they became the target of violence. And what I didn't know is that there was actually a second round. So anyway,
yeah, I didn't know that either.
That's the terrifying part. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. They described their ordeal, and let's just hear from their perspective what they were going through.
I think the whole event was probably 14 or 15 minutes, and there was a lengthy period of time when we were on the front porch together, and we're just kind of moving like this. I don't remember ever pointing my rifle at anybody.
Is there any? Have you seen any footage of you doing?
No, I have not. Now I have seen. Probably a fair representation of the footage shows that maybe she did.
Well, she pointed the non-functioning gun.
See, this is another thing. She had a non-functioning gun. That's the other thing about it, Vicky. Her gun wasn't even working. And that's going to become increasingly relevant.
I believe that because she was so careless. I mean, she went behind her husband and with the gun still pointed at the crowd through her husband.
Well, but a lot of people.
I believe she's never touched a gun before, and I don't think would give her a loaded gun.
Well, a lot of people would think that, she's just not properly trained in the use of firearms, and so she's reckless. So, honestly, I don't think she was even thinking about anything other than go away, mob,
Which was your hope.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Your hope was that they thought it was the real gun.
Yes.
and that you were a brave enough lady to use it, because what woman comes out and goes on the grass right next to them?
I picked a good one. That's all I
know. Oh, you sure did, my friend.
Yeah.
That's a lot of courage, Patty. God, I almost feel like crying thinking about it. She has the non-functioning gun. You have the AK-47, which for the life of you don't want what?
AR-15.
AR-15.
This is an American gun made by Colt.
AR-15. You have every desire in the world not to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't want to kill anybody.
But also you don't want to be killed, and you don't want your wife being killed. You want your daughter being killed, and your house burned down.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what do you continue to talk back at them at that point?
We did not engage them in any conversation.
Because I don't remember seeing much conversation when the iconic footage that we see the two of you standing there. You're holding the weapon, you're pointing the weapon, and they're yelling.
They're yelling.
So what are they yelling?
They're everything, cunt, bitch, death, fire, all this kind of stuff. There were, to their credit, there were a couple of handlers that were telling the crowd in general, keep moving, go down this, keep going. And there was then the hardcore group that
so
wanted,
some were moving on,
yeah,
but some were taunting you.
Yes.
And those are the ones you thought were the hardcore ones that were going to come in the house and destroy everything.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some very serious looking people that were there.
Did they have weapons?
They did have weapons. They were wearing body armor.
Did they display the weapons?
I never saw a weapon displayed to me. The only thing I saw was one guy was wearing a sidearm. Another guy had pulled two loaded magazines out of the pockets.
Now tell me about these. There are two of these guys in body armor, right?
Yeah, standing directly in front of me, and for the obvious purpose of being intimidating.
And how far away, roughly?
They were close enough that when one guy pulled the magazines out of the pockets of his body armor and showed them to me, he did so specifically so that I could see that they were loaded, and I could see that they were loaded. I could see.
What kind of magazines
looked like they were, for me, they looked like they were Sig Sauer double-stack magazines with 9mm in them.
So you were close enough
that I could see that kind of.
And you were able to see roughly what kind of a magazine it was.
Yeah. Serious
ammunition, right?
And he clicks them together like that and says, "You're next." And it's very clear what he meant by that.
How was this guy dressed up?
He was wearing on camo body armor. I can't remember as I sit here right now if he had his face covered or not. I don't think so.
Was he white or
an
black?
African-American gentleman. I think the one to his right was wearing light-colored body armor. Said one time he turned his back to me, it said human shield across the back of it. He was a fellow that was armed.
Could you tell
he had
what his race was?
Mask up to here, and then...
So you had no idea if he was
head covering here.
White, black, or something else?
No way I'm telling. But he was very intimidating. He was purposely being intimidated and kept inching.
But he said nothing.
He said nothing.
The other guy is the one who basically said the magazines were for you.
Yes, exactly.
Did you at that time figure it was over? This was it. This was the execution stage of the riot.
That was, although the crowd was now dissipating and the numbers were smaller, but that was the most serious. That was the time.
Yeah, I mean that's when the hit would be done. Probably
most serious.
Fewer people around, fewer witnesses.
Yeah. I
mean, I know a lot about hits.
Yeah, well, that's when I thought that the fireworks.
I love the fact that he knows a lot about hits. You got to ask yourself the question: is that from his time as mayor dealing with the mafia, or has he ordered a few? You never know.
His father was in the mafia.
Okay, all right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I did.
And he went the other way, which is very interesting. I mean, that does happen. It's kind of like the Godfather story, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
because that was the same story with Michael, except that he, of course, went with the mob, but he intended to go the straight way.
Yeah. Well, with Giuliani, you never quite really know if he went the other way or which way he went, or maybe he went both ways. Yeah.
I don't know. I was in New York.
He seems very personable.
When some of that bringing down of John Gotti occurred, and when they were basically rolling him up at that point. But they did get out of hand because on the block that on 2nd Avenue, before we moved in there had been a mob hit in one of the restaurants that was on 2nd Avenue that we heard about. So I guess they were pretty much out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they say that Giuliani was instrumental in cleaning up New York, cleaning the mob out, at least doing a lot to fight crime. I guess my problem is I have a hard time reconciling his role in 9/11 with being a, upstanding, spotless, American. I don't know,
Yeah, I don't know how much of what he said, in those recordings that they have of him, how much did he actually know about it? Because I do believe that it was planned during the Clinton administration.
At 9/11? September 11th, 2001?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what he knew. It just seems hard to imagine that an operation like that on the scale that it is, that he wouldn't have some clue ahead of time, especially given the fact that, Silverstein and all Silverstein's role. Silverstein, of course, is the guy who had the lease on the buildings, and he collected the insurance money.
Yeah, but that was Port Authority. Port Authority is a separate governing structure, a regional transportation organization over all transportation facilities and perhaps land development in the New York, New Jersey area. So Giuliani, as mayor of New York City, was not in charge of the Port Authority.
Yeah.
Which is it's a really important organizational structure for people to understand, because the Democrats use that same, I guess it's Democrats, our government, beginning from the Great Society, has used that organizational structure, the regional transportation land use.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, the inland ports and all that.
Yeah, to basically defeat our elected representative government structure in our local governments and our county governments.
Yeah.
And so Port Authority, the Port Authority structure, it was created by an act of Congress in 1924, I believe. But if once you understand that structure, and then you apply it to the intermodal commerce zones, transportation zones in our country, then you understand how this coup on our elected representative government has been done, and how the feds have they've funded these regional organizations to defeat our governing structure.
Yeah. Well, suffice it to say, as far as Giuliani is concerned, how do you get to the bottom of what he knew when he knew it and all that, as far as September 11th? At this point, I don't know that there is any way, but he seems to be doing a good work here in trying to expose corrupt officials, especially with the district attorneys. And that is a huge issue right now, given the fact, and by the way, I know we were hard on Fox News, I think it was last week, regarding the hosts, the anchors' unwillingness to talk about George Soros. And I don't know how much of that is the network itself and how much of that are the anchors themselves. Because I can tell you that Fox News, Tucker Carlson's on Fox News still, and he brings it up regularly. So,
well, they have to still maintain. They have to maintain the illusion that there's balance, and so they let Tucker Carlson go, but maybe control everybody else.
Maybe, or I wonder if the anchors are scared of either being called an anti-Semite because this narrative has been put forth that if you talk about George Soros, you're an anti-Semite. You're anti-Jew. You're a Jew hater.
Well, that's false too, because
I agree.
Soros himself has said, he might be Jewish, but he's not.
Well, I don't care if he's. Look, I don't care what he is. Nobody is off limits to be talked about and critically. Nobody. I don't care who you are. And so this is just something they hide behind. You know, if you talk about somebody who's black, well, then you're a racist. You know, it's the same thing. Nobody is above criticism. You know, we have to be able to talk about people critically, and I don't care who they are, or you know, if they say this is off limits, that's exactly where you should go, as far as your criticism is concerned, because that proves that they're trying to hide something. And as far as Soros is concerned, you know, these anchors, you know, it could be, and I'm not making excuses for them, because there is no excuse. They, you know, you're on a network, somebody brings something up that's you. If you know, there should be no gatekeepers, and that's what I love about what we do. We answer to nobody here. I mean, we do whatever we want because we don't even have a network to worry about. You know, this is total free speech radio. Anything we want to say, we can say. Nobody, you know, we don't have to worry about our lords and masters. You know, I answer to one Lord and Master, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, I answer to God, and that's it. You know, and it's incredibly liberating, by the way.
Yes, it is.
But the thing about it is that these people, you know, I wonder if they know, the anchors, if they know that Soros controls the mob, and I wonder if they're afraid, Vicky, that the mob is going to go after them if they talk about Soros.
I don't know.
I have to go watch that clip again.
Thought. I haven't
it's almost
really
like they're
about
scared.
That.
Because, you know, you got to keep in mind, Tucker Carlson, he's very courageous, but he's had the mob going after. They were on his front lawn. He had to move because of them.
Well, and I remember back when Lou Dobbs was covering illegal immigration and H-1B visas a lot. There was a shot taken at him too. You know, he lives in a home on a big piece of property. I think it was New Jersey. But he had shooters out, you know, trying to shoot at him too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, anyway, getting back to the McCloskeys.
When the hardcore people are around who aren't going to testify.
And most of the cameras are already gone.
And then what happened?
Eventually, the last of the stragglers went away.
When did the two body armor guys go?
They were the last, I think. I think they were the last guys.
They just turn around and walk away?
They eventually...
Very angry about walking away, but they did.
They eventually
did somebody urge them to walk away?
I don't
Nobody
think so.
To urge.
I think they were...
But apparently they were abandoned, I guess, at some point.
They probably felt a little alone at that point because they were now standing out there by themselves. So eventually the crowd just moved on.
When they left, obviously... tremendous relief.
Oh, yeah.
Were you worried they might come back?
Oh, yeah.
For a while?
And because these things don't end. I mean, here...
But maybe were you worried they would come back that night?
Yes.
So now I assume we're talking about 7:30 at night.
Yeah, it's about 7:30 by the time it's all over. The metadata on my cell phone for the photos I took of the gate say 7:42. But our office is 3 blocks away, and I wanted to go and board it up, right?
Yes.
And so...
Well, they had said at the end, they said that we're taking a picture of your license plate, so we're going to find you and excuse me. You up in your business everywhere you go.
You got a business, it's gone.
It's gone.
Said.
Yeah, that kind of intimidation. And the guy's showing him his magazine and saying, that's for you. These are details you don't hear on TV. I had not heard this prior to this interview. And of course, there's more to the story. We know there's more to the story. But what I didn't know, and you said you didn't know, is that there is a second round. There was a second round, and they were warned ahead of time that they're coming for you. They're coming to kill you.
Now, a couple of days later, we get a call from a
current client of ours.
A current client.
We represented many members of her family, and nice people, nice family.
And she was upset and screaming at me and saying, "I can't."
This is like Tuesday after the Monday?
Tuesday, saying, "I'm so upset with you. They are coming to kill you and burn the house down."
Yeah. So now you went searching for.
Now we started searching
enhanced security,
private security,
and had real difficulty getting anyone to help you.
Absolutely,
local police.
Local police wouldn't do it. I called 911. And 911, answers.
But they had already responded to
the first
That took
call.
only 2 hours.
Yeah. But now for about 20 minutes, the 911 operator is recording saying 911 operators are busy. Don't hang up. 911 operators are busy.
Did they offer at least a social worker or a
guidance counselor? No. But and then finally a dispatcher came on, and I said I need to talk to the area commander to see whether or not we're going to get any enhanced security here. Eventually I got a policeman on the phone, and she said, would you like to talk to my lieutenant? I said, well, yeah, that's what I've been doing here. And so eventually I was able to leave my name and number with the lieutenant's voicemail. No one ever called me back. So then I started trying to call secondary employment cops. None of the local cops wanted to get involved. They didn't want the bad press. So we went one level up to people that provide international corporate security, an entity locally here. And they'd gotten some bad press during the Ferguson incident. They didn't want to get involved in it. So they referred me back to secondary employment, local police, all right? Go full circle. And finally, now it's like Wednesday afternoon.
And Friday's D-Day.
Friday's D-Day.
Friday, as far as you were told, they're coming to kill you.
And there's nothing we can do about it.
And they put out a flyer, too, confirming that they're
saying,
coming.
We ain't done yet. They're going to meet.
And they had an indication of where to meet and what time.
2 blocks.
Mm-hmm. 2 blocks away, and where to meet, what time, and we ain't done yet. And so I'd gotten a call earlier in the week from the White House saying that the president wanted to let us know that he supported us. And if there's anything they could do, let me know. It was a guy who was in charge of the office of personnel for the White House called. But then I call him back and I say, after we'd run out of options, I said, you said that if I ever needed any help, I could call on you. Well, now I've got to call on you. So he gave me Mark Meadows' cell phone number, and we got a hold of Mark Meadows. And I don't know what happened after that.
And you told them that you told your predicament.
Yeah, told them the predicament.
Police are not going to help you. Local police are not going to help you. Private security is kind of flaking out on you.
It ceased to exist.
They're scared out of their minds.
And we've been promised death and destruction.
And they said, just take the highest level security company told us, just take things that are important to you, like your photos, and leave.
Abandon the house and leave. And I just said, I'm not going to
give up your life
away.
Yeah, and right? So
after, your creation.
Yeah. And so the second call I made after Mark Meadows was I called Tucker Carlson. And Patty's sitting, we're in the kitchen, and I'm telling this story. I said, look,
To Tucker?
Yeah. And I said, we have no other options now. And he went on the air that night and said that,
It's amazing. You have to call. I mean, I love Tucker. I mean, nothing wrong with calling him. It's amazing that you have to call a talk show host to get protection.
Yeah. Well,
from death.
This is.
Where are we living?
I said it from my first public interview on this matter till today. It's a bizarro, upside down world when I can't count on my local government, but the people that came to support us the most, the White House and Tucker Carlson.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts at this point in time. The thing that comes to my mind, Vicky, is the fact that these people are somewhat affluent. I took it that they're involved in the legal world. They have a beautiful home. I mean, it's amazing, the home. So they've got money. And, with money, you can buy some influence. And yet, despite the fact that they had money, they could have paid for private security, couldn't find any private security that was willing to help them, and ended up having to rely upon a talk show host. And, the publicity from the event got the President of the United States' attention, and he had one of his staffers call them. And that's the only way that they were able to get any protection, is through Tucker Carlson and through, official channels at the White House. I mean, the overwhelming majority of the American people don't have this kind of affluence, or they're either that or their case doesn't get to be high profile. They're just destroyed and murdered, and nobody ever hears about it. Or maybe they're a footnote on a page, buried in the back of the newspaper somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible that McCluskey is in the regional, a member of the regional the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which would be a power position in the community and part of the corruption. But I can't say that.
I doubt that. I doubt that. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I doubt that. Because why would they target him? If he was helping to implement the plan, he would be left alone.
No. The power structure that has to do with the transportation system, like the Port Authority, yeah, I can see how they could be targeted, but it would be like a false flag thing. You know, we know they're trying to get rid of local police.
Yeah.
And what makes local police look bad? When they don't respond, right?
I think
when they
honestly,
don't do their job.
I just want to follow the evidence on this until I had any evidence to implicate them in any negative way.
No. Well, I said he might be. I mean, that might be one reason why he was targeted, because clearly he was targeted.
Yes, clearly he was.
And so there has to be
but
a reason why.
It could just be that his home was fancy, and they say, here's something fancy we can destroy. And they do point out that there's other fancy homes in the area, but they were destroying a lot of stuff. And it's funny how
a lot of the choice of target would be, how it sounds like his house was right off a main street, even if it was behind a locked gate. So it could be the fact that it was a big fancy house and the location of it made it a good
prime target. The other thing is they mentioned, and I think it might be in this final clip, I'm not sure, but they talked about how a number of different houses have pointed out. In fact, Giuliani mentioned that there was a Black Lives Matter big giant sign in a window or something, someplace on a house that he drove by, and because I guess this interview was conducted in the McCloskey's home, and he says I drove by a real fancy house with a big Black Lives Matter, and the gentleman he says. Well, yeah, he says those all went up. Basically, it's like, the Passover lamb in the Bible, where you put the blood on the doorpost to the house and hopefully the death angel will pass over you. That's the kind of fear that's being generated by these terrorists. That people would, okay, please leave me alone. But we've told people before on this broadcast that you can put Black Lives Matter on the marquee of your business. They'll still burn it down. I mean, that's one of the biggest, most instructive photographs, I think, that should be an award-winning photograph, is when the entire car dealership was engulfed in flames, but in the foreground you still can see the sign, which is the only thing that's not fully engulfed, that says on the marquee, Black Lives Matter. And another one with the store windows broke out has something about diversity on it. Those are very instructive photos, I think. Demonstrates that you can give the mob, you can try to give them something, and please leave me alone, please leave me alone. That doesn't mean they're going to leave you alone. And really all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. These people are not reasonable. You can't reason with the mob. You can't reason with them. They're not reasonable. By their very nature, they're not reasonable.
Well, and that brings up the bigger point. Where's the FBI? Why aren't they investigating corruption in these police departments, where they are not the police departments, probably under orders by the mayors or the city council, they're not enforcing the law.
Yeah, well, and even forget the police departments. I mean, yeah, I think what you're saying, I think the local officials, all of them need to be investigated for corruption. I think the
state police, actually, because I was looking
Well, the state police answers to the governor.
Well,
so it really is the governor.
The governor, too. The whole organizational structure, you wonder, where is the FBI? I mean, have we just disintegrated? Has our government just disintegrated to the point where the governors are autocrats, independent, and not accountable under the law? laws of the United States?
Yeah, I think so.
It does seem so because, but there still should be. I was doing some research and I was looking at the state police, the organization of the state police, and interestingly, in Idaho, the state police are organized by districts that correspond to the Federal Economic Development Administration districts. So the state police, they have jurisdiction across the whole state. And why aren't they investigating this corruption of a city? I mean, they would have, I should think, some kind of jurisdiction. It's like nobody is doing their job.
Yeah,
and
I don't. To be fair,
to me about that is that is exactly what Vladimir Putin said about his country. What happened in his country when he was deputy mayor of I forget which city it was, but when the wall came down, everything he said it was like nobody was enforcing the law. Nobody was doing anything.
Yeah.
Everybody was standing down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, we have one more clip here from the McCloskeys. I think this one's a little shorter. I'm not sure. But, yeah, and again, I apologize for the length of these clips, but I think you can see why it was important to leave a lot of stuff in, because you need to fully understand the gravity of all the details in order to be able to appreciate what these people went through, what a terrible ordeal it was, and in fact it's still continuing because, as everyone knows, they're being prosecuted for defending themselves.
When do you find out that you're actually going to be the subject of a criminal investigation for defending your life and your house?
I think it was about July the 8th that Kim Gardner announced that she was going to charge us. Yeah. Well, here was a scenario. We had gotten home. We were still discombobulated. I mean, we're not thinking right because we were just tired and hadn't been to sleep since the 27th. But the
by just kind of getting home, what he's talking about is they had went out to dinner. After this was all over, they left and went to dinner and then came back, and he talks about how they accidentally set the alarm off. And this was not. This was the second. This was the second round, I believe.
Accidentally set off the burglar alarm when we got home. The cops show up at the door. Patty thinks it's a result of the false alarm in our burglar.
And they have a warrant.
They said, "Sorry about this. That's not what it's about. And believe me, we'd rather be anywhere else but here."
Here's a search warrant. And what do they do?
They said, well, take your time. You can call your lawyer. You can, take your time. We'll just stay here, and we just need the guns. But they didn't actually.
They never came in the house. They were nice. They said, I'd already given my lawyer the pistol, and so
the pistol meaning the one that didn't work.
The one that didn't work.
Who your lawyer knew didn't work.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So we end up getting charged with.
Now listen to this, folks. The pistol didn't work. The pistol that Patty was wielding out there wouldn't fire. It was a defective pistol. Now listen carefully to what they did here. I actually had to listen. I listened more than once, obviously clipping it, and I didn't catch this the first time. There was evidence tampering in this case, apparently, because when he'll tell you in here that he gave the defective pistol to his attorney, who was fully aware that it did not work. Listen to what he says here.
On a Class E felony, technically brandishing, which means that we're displaying I can't quote the statute to you directly, but it's essentially that we're displaying in an aggressive or angry manner a weapon readily capable of lethal use. And
well, you were, but she wasn't.
I was. And I searched the videos. I don't think I was doing anything aggressive or angry. I had a weapon that was readily capable.
But now tell me what has happened to your weapon that couldn't be used.
Well, do
you know what's happened?
No,
only what's been reported. Here's the scenario.
Well, the Attorney General told me that it was It was reconfigured.
Exactly.
It was
to make it look like it can fire. So we got somebody that's got to go to jail for obstruction of justice.
Here's what happened. The assistant circuit attorney.
I assume if we're in America, we are in America.
We still are.
Okay.
We'll find out November 3rd. The assistant circuit attorney is named Chris Hinckley. Chris Hinckley instructed the crime lab to disassemble the pistol, make it work, reassemble it, because one of the necessary elements of the offense is a weapon.
So he's an operative of Gardner.
Yeah, exactly.
So now let's explain how Gardner got elected. Gardner was elected based on massive contributions from George Soros. George Soros has no connection to St. Louis, does he?
No, I don't think so.
Like he had no connection to Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Or to Chicago?
Yeah.
Or to Contra Costa, California? Or to the 27 other places that he's elected district attorneys who do things like don't prosecute property crimes, don't prosecute murder cases. Since she's been in office, I've been informed that she has turned down 60% of the cases presented to her.
Well, just for example, on the riots in St. Louis that started after the George Floyd death, I think there were 250 or so looters and rioters that were arrested. She released them all.
So that's basically saying go riot again.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like we don't want to interrupt your rioting.
Yeah.
So she gets elected, paid for by George Soros. Virtually at the same time, George Soros is funding Black Lives Matter and funding district attorneys in other places where similar kinds of riots have taken place and similar kinds of releases have taken place of rioters, namely Chicago, where Kim Foxx was supported by Soros, and the police in Chicago, you might have seen 3 weeks ago, had a big protest because she released every single rioter in Chicago.
Yeah.
Do you see a pattern here?
No, I don't see any pattern.
This is the pattern.
Yeah.
And I'll also note that most of the riots, if not all of them, have taken place in Democratic cities, and almost all of them with district attorneys that they have in their pocket.
Yeah.
This is corrupt as hell.
Yeah.
And you are the victims of it.
You know, in Kim Gardner's campaign literature, at least in this election cycle, she doesn't talk about enforcing the law against criminals. She talks about changing the power structure.
Well, she doesn't. Yeah. She doesn't enforce the law. She doesn't take 60% of the cases. She prosecutes only 20% of the remaining ones. Her record of you wouldn't hire her in a second to be an assistant lawyer. She can't win a case. I don't know if she even goes to court. She is involved in a major investigation for attempting to frame the former governor. Her investigator is under indictment. It looks as if she completely created a case to get out of office a too right-wing governor who, by the way, backed off Black Lives Matter, the Soros-sponsored organization, to help her sponsor Soros. She indicted your governor on what appears to be now clearly a phony charge, and the agent that she used is under indictment, who is probably on the verge of flipping, hopefully. And you must feel like this is Kafka.
Yeah, it is.
Not America.
So that's it. That's where we are in America today, when a billionaire can go and fund district attorneys who then turn around and terrorize the public. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's going on. And you could the thing that comes to mind, Vicky, is nobody is safe. You know, with this huge amount of money going into these districts, these jurisdictions, where these district attorneys are being basically, you've got an overthrow of democratic government. The people are not really getting their voice
back to
heard.
Is the Supreme Court decision that money is free speech.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether it was Montana or Wyoming. They had a law against, I think it was outside money coming into the state for elections. And their law, which had been in effect, whatever the law was, it had been in effect for over 100 years. And it was overturned because of the Supreme Court ruling that money is free speech. And I think that was a John Roberts special, wasn't it?
I don't know. Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, you know, we have these billionaires making war on us, and we have a Department of Justice that is sitting on their hands. You know, our prosecutors are in such a special position, and there is no check and balance.
Well, they're not sitting on their hands. They're not sitting on their hands. What they're trying to do is gut Section 230, which protects website owners from being able to not be liable for the things the people who use their website post. You know, that's what the Justice Department's busy doing. Making it so that people can't own private websites and have public comments on them. You know, and this is all being done under the guise of, fighting big tech. You know, the Facebooks, the Twitters, and all that. Instead of targeting those specific companies and taking away their Section 230 protection, they're targeting Section 230, which is very, very wrong-headed and stupid, unless your goal is to shut down free speech. So this is the problem. This is what the Justice Department's busy. They're not sitting on their hands. They're doing more terror upon the people's freedoms.
What is Section 230? That's the one that defines the big tech companies as publishers or not?
Yes,
as
yes.
publishers?
You're thinking of the right one. If they're publishers, then they are subject to the liability. If they're not, it's got specific language in there, and I don't have it before me. Unfortunately, I hadn't planned on talking about it at the moment. But I just saw Gab is throwing a fit about this, but this is something that's been going on for a little while, for a number of months. They have been, there's some articles from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, for instance, which is sort of on the left, but they seem to be level-headed on most things. I don't agree with them on everything. Here we go. Let me just read this. This is back from June 18th of this year. Two different proposals to amend Section 230 share a similar goal: damage online users' speech. They say, whether we know it or not, all Internet users rely on multiple online services to connect, engage, and express themselves online. That means we also rely on 47 U.S.C. Section 230, which provides important legal protections when platforms offer their services to the public and when they moderate the content that relies on those services, from the proverbial cat video to an incendiary blog post. Section 230 is an essential legal pillar for online free speech. When powerful people don't like that speech or the platforms that host it, the provision becomes a scapegoat for just about every tech-related problem. Over the past few years, those attacks have accelerated. On Wednesday, and this was again back in June, they say we saw two of the most dangerous proposals yet, and one from the Department of Justice and the other from Senator Josh Hawley. The proposals take different approaches, but they both seek to create new legal regimes that will allow public officials or private individuals to bury platforms in litigation simply because they do not like how those platforms offer their services. Basic activities like offering encryption or editing or removing or otherwise moderating users' content could lead to years of legal costs and liability risk. That's bad for platforms and for the rest of us. So, anyway, the point is that the Section 230 is, and again, it's 47 U.S.C. Section 230. It protects these, like for instance, my website, governamerica.com, or I got others. But if I offer a way for people, and we do, for people to comment on stories or things that we post, somebody could go on there. Let's say I could either moderate it or just put it to where the comment posts immediately. Somebody could go on there and post something that's libelous, or they could go and post. Let's say they threaten to blow something up. Because that comment is on my website, I could potentially be liable if it weren't for Section 230. But Section 230 protects, there's a certain amount of protection there for the website owner, because the recognition is that somebody else has posted this, and so therefore you have a certain amount of insulation from what other people do versus what you do. If you're controlling the platform completely, then you're a publisher. If you're not, then you've got this Section 230 protection. If you do away with that, it's going to force website owners to either moderate their content like a publisher and not have anybody be able to post anything, or potentially face, as they point out here, years of liability and stuff, which ultimately would bankrupt the company. I mean, or bankrupt an individual. It could end up, private individuals would not be able. I mean, it could very well be that Facebook, Twitter, they could have huge legal war chests and fend off a lot of these attacks. But a private individual certainly wouldn't be able to. Somebody like me.
Private individuals aren't really the issue. It's like my website. I allow comments.
This would apply to you.
But we're too small. We don't count. This is really an important issue for the big platforms.
I think it's an important issue for all of us, Vicky. I really do, because what the internet does, the fact that you got you might think you don't have enough traffic to be that important, but you know what? The fact that you got a website there and that people can find it, that is a great equalizer. That means that anybody can find the stuff, anybody can link to your stuff. The content is there, and the fact that it's there at all is, and it's being shared with the entire rest of the World Wide Web. That puts you in a position where you're able to get information out that's uncensored, and that makes you a certain amount of a target. You never know when something's going to go viral. You never know when something's going to catch somebody's attention. I've had a number of things that have happened that have. There's things that I have posted on our website in the past that I've forgotten it was even there, and then next thing I know, I'm seeing it in the stats and like, what in the world is that? Because all of a sudden, after years, it's getting a lot of attention, and suddenly something old has become relevant again. And people are interested in it, and they're sharing it. And so I look at that, and I say, oh, I can see why people are going for that, because it comes up in a search. So you just never know how important the stuff that you do really is. But anyway, so I just wanted to bring this issue up, and it's and there's an article here from Reason. Section 230 is the Internet's First Amendment. Now both Republicans and Democrats want to take it away. So both the left, which is Electronic Frontier Foundation, and the right, which is this one was from Reason, they're both the people who are reasonable, are coming out on both sides and saying, don't mess with Section 230. We need to keep Section 230, and I agree with them. If you want to target the companies that are doing the censorship, then target them individually. But I would rather not anybody be targeted than to mess with the protections that are afforded in Section 230. So that's my spiel.
I'm going to have to look into that because I really hadn't read the details on that. But the big companies, Twitter, Facebook, they are censoring political speech. There's no doubt about that.
It's a problem. It is a problem.
They're censoring it only on one side.
But if you have a mouse in a room of your house, you don't burn the whole house down, to use an odd metaphor. But I think it works. I think the metaphor. I mean, they're burning down the whole neighborhood just to deal with a rodent problem. I just don't think that's a good idea. Anyway, but as far as getting back to the McCloskeys and their situation, you can always call your pimp, Vicky, if you want to. If you want to deal with the crime problem, the mob problem, hey, call in the pimp.
So the question is, when all the police are gone, and that is the goal, that's the stated goal of BLM, where will the rest of us be? And who will replace them exactly? Well, the city of Seattle has thought about this, maybe more than anyone else, and this week delivered an answer. We learned that Seattle began paying $12,500 a month to a pimp called Andre Taylor. Pimp Taylor boasts that he can communicate with, quote, gang members, pimps, and prostitutes who won't sit down with anyone else. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin, probably the worst mayor ever. I don't know. She and de Blasio in the running for it. She says she's proud of the deal. She says the pimp's lived experience is invaluable. You know, pimps. The ones who beat hookers with coat hangers. It's valuable. It's valuable experience. In 2016, for example, the pimp vowed to, quote, go to war with Seattle after police shot and killed his brother. So are pimps the solution the rest of us have been searching for but couldn't quite articulate until the geniuses in Seattle came up with it? It's possible. Jason Rantz hosts a radio show in Seattle, and he joins us tonight. Jason, thanks for coming on. So pimps are the answer to Seattle's future.
Well, clearly, that's not your go-to solution when dealing with civil unrest and crime. Oh, no, because you're not a crazy person. And yet in Seattle, we decide to give this kind of power to someone. And this is directly from the actual contract. He's supposed to offer expertise and support services in de-escalation and alternatives to policing. This is someone who at the time of CHOP was out there trying to communicate and come up with deals for people to give up on CHOP so they can get up to $1 or $2 million going into sort of nebulously defined community service groups that could help address some of the problems. He said he was going to be the go-between. That failed, but it sounds like he's actually been rewarded with this $150,000 contract. So where you screw up in Seattle, you get a little bit of a leg up. All these rap lyrics talk about how so hard it is to be a pimp. It turns out all you have to do is come to Seattle.
Anyway, we got to take the top of the hour break, but that's what I call out-of-the-box thinking, Vicky. Out-of-the-box thinking.
Out of this world thinking.
Yeah, we'll be back, folks.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
From FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the second hour of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 26th of September. Let's try this again. It continues to be the 26th of September, 2020, as we continue on here. And by the way, we are recording on Friday. So we were not able to take calls today. I had a prior engagement, as they say, and so consequently we are. But I wanted to provide a new show for everybody because there's just too much going on today to not do a new show, and that's the point. The thought of all this stuff happening and us not being able to talk about it is worrying to me. And one of the things that I did want to discuss is Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Vicky, they're saying now that he's hearing voices, and he's at a high risk of suicide. This is greatly worrying to me, because this guy, the deep state would just love to be able to snuff this guy out in the first place. And now it's very conveniently, it sounds like they're setting the stage for that to happen.
They've been torturing the guy. I forget, it was at some point, I guess, when the president of Ecuador lost the election and a new guy took over. And it was at the point where the new president took over that Julian Assange went from being a
prisoner there, basically.
A protected person to becoming a prisoner.
Yeah, he was in the embassy for many, many years, and basically was dragged out, like a wild animal, essentially. He was dragged out, mistreated, mishandled, and he ended up in Belmarsh prison, where he's been ever since. And now, this whole process of extradition, they're trying to move forward with that. But, whenever they come out and say that he's hearing voices and at a high risk of suicide, and that's according to a psychiatrist, well, the question I have is, if that's true, what kind of psychotropic drugs do you have this guy on? I wonder what they're giving him to make him hear voices. I mean, I have every reason to believe he is being tortured. The fact that he's there is torture enough in of itself, but we have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And this is very worrying. And his crime was journalism. His crime was putting out information that embarrassed the establishment. And for that, he's got to go through this. And the fact that journalists, I didn't mean to insult the profession of journalism. But the fact,
why not?
The fact,
but
they're not journalists.
So
that's the whole point.
At this point.
Vicky, they're not journalists. They're not journalists. Journalism is a respectable profession. Most of the people that are on TV that call themselves journalists are not respectable. They are pundits. They are engaged in punditry, but they're not journalists. Journalists who are people who document facts as they happen. It's like writing down in a journal. You're documenting things. You're telling the facts, leaving your opinions out of it as much as possible. But what's going on today is not journalism. And but Julian Assange took documentation. Some of it was classified, but he didn't do it recklessly. Him and his team went through and they redacted a lot of stuff to keep from putting out sensitive information. And but everything he released was 100% accurate. Now, what kind of track record do most journalists, who are real journalists, how can they say? Most of them don't have a 100% track record. So far, he hasn't been proven wrong on anything. And yet he's in prison for his crimes, and all these supposed journalists out there are not saying a word about it because they blame Trump. They blame him for Trump, when in reality it shouldn't matter. He is somebody who stood for the truth, and now he's essentially he's a target. He's a huge target. They're never going to let him out. I think that he knows a lot more than people realize he knows about the Russiagate, about all of this stuff, and they can never let him talk.
Yeah, well, I think he got his start actually in Singapore. I know he when he first started reporting, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, Singapore is the what I would say was the first platform for the technocratic tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
For I don't know, law enforcement. I know that when they in 2003, when they reorganized our Justice Department, Singapore was mentioned in a meeting with our DOJ officials and local officials, a meeting in Florida, and I have this documented on my website. Singapore was a hub. So when you're talking about the technocratic police state surveillance system, Singapore is one of the pilot projects, I would say. I've heard it said that it's one of the most technologically enabled cities in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, this is an article you sent me. U.S. Europeans say Belarusian leader illegitimate as new crackdown follows surprise swearing in. There are a number of different color revolutions taking place around the world and have been in the past, and we've talked about them a lot on our broadcast here. I believe a lot of what's going on here in the United States is really our own color revolution. I think, honestly, I think everything we're seeing today, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but I think everything that we're seeing today goes back to the time when Hillary Clinton lost the election, and they came out wearing the purple outfit. Bill Clinton had purple on. She had purple on. I think that was a signal to the world.
Oh, it was, most definitely. Absolutely.
Because, they've talked about these people. Like, for instance, one of the things that was mentioned and by the way, folks, I featured a lot of what the McCloskeys were talking about on the show, and some might argue too much, but I thought it was important. But one thing I don't think we included was the fact that they were talking about one of these people who ended up in the Cory Bush was leading the crowd out in front. They brought it's like 1,000 people or something like that out there for the second round, for the second event, where they were all going to come and kill them. And one of the things they mentioned in there is Cory Bush was out there with a bullhorn chanting the crowd on. You're not going to stop the revolution. You can't stop the revolution. And now she's in the House of Representatives in Congress. So the point is that I went and looked her up last night and was looking at some of her campaign stuff, and it's all purple. So and I thought these symbols, not to place too much emphasis on them, but I think symbols are important, and certainly they're used by the other side extensively. And so I have to question, was this, again, a part of the messaging? And it goes right back to 2016. What are they telling us about all of this stuff? Anyway, the article about Belarus, what's going on there? Riot troops used truncheons and water cannon and detained dozens of protesters as clashes escalated in Minsk and other cities following Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's surprise swearing in for his sixth term despite weeks of unprecedented public calls for his exit. Lukashenko's secretive inauguration earlier on September 23rd immediately met with criticism from members of the opposition who refused to accept the results of the August 9th vote, following jailings and other intimidation tactics to mute dissent and limit would-be challengers in the form of Soviet state of more than 9 million. As scenes of the latest crackdown on Belarusian demonstrators emerged, the United States added its name to a growing list of Western countries that responded to the swearing in by saying they won't recognize Lukashenko's presidency. Well, excuse me, United States, it's not your business. This is their affairs. Why do we have to recognize or not recognize? They say the elections August 9th were neither free nor fair, and this is the State Department spokeshole talking this. The announced results were fraudulent and did not convey legitimacy. Now, this is what they're going to say come November here in the United States, by the way. You just know this is coming, Vicky. Mm-hmm. The United States cannot consider Alexander Lukashenko the legitimately elected president or leader of Belarus. The State Department called for a national dialogue culminating in a free and fair election under independent observation. Now, the thing that you wanted to and they go on about, after nightfall, the protesters and anti-Lukashenko drivers blocked some streets at the Capitol. But I think the quote that you had that you found relevant, I'm trying to find, where is it here? Was it our statehood?
You might have just read it about the technology.
No, here it is, I think. Quote, and this is Lukashenko talking, our statehood had to face an unprecedented challenge based on well-developed technologies that are aimed at destroying independent states. He said that during his inauguration speech. And he was alluding to the previous claims that Western states were fomenting a pro-democracy revolution against him. He continued, however, we turned out to be one of those few countries where a color revolution failed, or perhaps we were the only such country. It was a choice made by the Belarusian people who don't want to lose their country. So there it is. Technologies that are aimed at destroying independent states. And what do we have here? What have we had here, Vicky, but an independent state? And these technocrats are doing everything they can to destroy it using various technologies.
Right. And so now we know, and I've seen this before, that free and fair elections is one of the main elements of the color revolutions. But when they say free and fair elections, what they actually mean is that they want to implement a technological overseer of the elections, and that overseer is part of the global governing system, and it's all technology based.
Yeah.
Okay, now you just mentioned the color purple. What is the significance of the color purple? I wrote on my old website, I have a page called The Color Purple.
Okay.
And this was a very early web page of mine, probably written around 2004, 2005, because where I got the color purple was from Thomas P.M. Barnett. Okay, and in his presentation, Military in the 21st Century, he called for a new ordering principle. And this is a quote, the new ordering principle, he says, take that map, take the definition of crisis, talk about how we are going to change DOD. I will make an argument about ordering principle. I will say it is a core conflict model around which everything is planned, procured, organized, trained, operated. How you become a flag. And he's talking about flag officer. Mm-hmm. He says, you change career paths, you change the military in about 8 or 10 years. Frankly, I would like to see all flags become totally purple.
Huh.
Okay, now what is purple? Purple is the combining of red and blue.
Yeah.
To a single entity, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you merge those colors together. So that's what they're talking about, is the merger of the political organizations of the United States to accommodate the technocratic tyranny.
Yeah.
And it's not just the United States. It's all over the world because the technocratic tyranny is global.
It also happens to be the color that you turn if you can't breathe anymore.
Yeah, well, they're trying to turn us purple, right?
You turn purple, and then you die.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that has any significance, but it does strike me as being, I think, relevant. Worrying.
Well, it does fit the scenario, doesn't it?
Certainly does. They're choking us to death, Anyway, there's a hearing that you found at the Center for Security Policy, which I thought was very impressive, actually. It was a discussion about the threat of the Communist Chinese to the United States. Of course, we have to point out the communist Chinese wouldn't be a threat if if the globalists here in the United States didn't make them a threat.
Right. They were invited in.
They were invited in. They handed them our economy, hook, line, and sinker. I mean, they gave them all the tools they need. And I've been railing about this for years. They've given everything away. And that's one thing Trump says that's correct. They've given everything away. They've allowed all these countries to take advantage of us. And it's not just taking advantage. This is the systematic, intentional destruction of our nation by globalists who should be swinging from a rope.
That I sent to you about H.R. McMaster using the word condominium.
Yeah, I got that. We'll deviate. Let's go ahead and play that then. We're kind of jumping around, but that's okay. Let's see. Here it is.
Well,
what I try to describe is
where you're going with that China panel.
Okay.
So, but
yeah, he's talking about his book. There's a show that they do called. I think this is the Hoover Institution, right?
Yes.
And there's a show they do called Goodfellows, and he was on the Goodfellows show. And sounds pretty mafiaistic to me. But anyway, they're on the Goodfellows show, and they're talking about his book.
What I try to describe is the emotional impetus behind foreign policy as it grew out of the victory of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the lopsided victory over Iraq in the Gulf War, returning Kuwait to the status quo ante. And the 90s, I think, were a period of tremendous optimism. It was a decade of sustained economic growth. And that optimism, I think, led to over-optimism and complacency in foreign policy. There were a number of assumptions we made during that period of time. One of those was that there was an arc of history that guaranteed the primacy of our free and open societies over closed authoritarian systems and of our free market economic system over statist or mercantilist models. Another assumption was that our military, having demonstrated tremendous prowess during the Gulf War, was going to be unmatched, right? Future wars would be fast, cheap, and efficient. And great power competition was a relic of the past, right? There was going to be a condominium of nations. And we saw the advent of some of these terms like global governance and so forth. But then I think it was a setup. All that was a setup for some of the shocks and disappointments of the early 2000s. Of course, the mass murder attacks of 9/11 demonstrated that our enemies have the option to fight us asymmetrically, right? And they used box cutters and airplanes to kill nearly 3,000 innocents and take trillions of dollars out of the U.S. economy. And then we had the unanticipated length and difficulties of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, in large measure because we went into those wars with a short-term, short war mentality, and then the 2008 financial crisis. And we've talked about a lot of this on Goodfellas. That shook our confidence.
Right.
And that pendulum swung, right, from overconfidence and maybe a failure to consider the risks and costs of action to, I believe, resignation, really, almost under the Obama administration, and a failure to consider enough the risks and costs of inaction.
Condominium of nations. That's the new world order.
Condominium of nations. And the first time I heard that, it was just a couple of years ago. It was when Lawrence Eagleburger was doing an interview on C-SPAN about I think it was about the meeting on Malta, when it was in 1989, bottom line. And when I looked that up, what a condominium is, it's a territory over which two or more states jointly exercise governmental authority.
Yeah. Think of apartment.
So his use of that term, condominium, in relation to global governance, it's an admission. Mm-hmm. And I just about, jumped out of my chair when I heard him say it. Because it's huge that he said it. It's an admission that they were building a global governing structure. And in the meetings of the G7, I have the documentation on that showing the pilot global governing systems that they were establishing. And pilot, for the record, pilot doesn't mean that they do it and then throw it away. It just means it is the initiation of the beginning of building a system. And that was right before George Herbert Walker Bush kicked off the new transportation system, which was fully automated highway system, surveillance tracking, and data collection, and it was planned to be international. So that's where the beginning of global governance started.
What's astounding is that, he says that nobody bats an eye. You did, but nobody else will. It's completely ignored. And, he's a high-profile individual.
He sure is. I mean, he's been involved in all of it. He was he's a military historian, and he was in the military during, I think, the Kuwait War, the Gulf War, all of that. Continuing on, and he was the national security advisor at the beginning of the Trump administration.
Well, it's very obvious that what the United Nations is a condominium of nations, but it goes a little further than even that, because ultimately they want to do away with nationhood. I think the condominium idea...
the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, is the actual center of the condominium, because that organization was created as a result of the 1975 Helsinki Agreement, and it was that agreement when East and West started coming together. Mm-hmm. And so I think that they really are the interparliamentary body. Yeah. And they're all about human rights, human rights, this, that, and the other.
Yeah, when here's the thing, folks, human rights sounds good, and there's, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for instance. It sounds good. People love it because they're saying, hey, the United Nations recognizes our rights. But you have to keep in mind, when somebody is defining your rights, number one, it puts them in charge of what your rights are or aren't. So that gives them power over you if you accept that. Number two, by defining your rights, what they're really doing is limiting your rights to whatever they say your rights are. So you have to keep in mind, our rights don't come from man. Our rights come from God. They're God-given. We have inherent rights. But so when they say your rights are this, your rights are that, what they're really doing is limiting your rights.
Right, because they can take, whatever they give, they can take away.
That's right. So back to the Center for Security Policy. The panelists were Frank Gaffney. He's the founder and executive chairman of the center. There's Sam Faddis, who's retired Army captain and CIA operations officer, and Jeff Nyquist, who is said to be an expert on Russian and communist military foreign policy. They were talking about the communist Chinese tactics, and I thought it was a very interesting discussion.
Sam, I mentioned at the outset, of course, that you have a lot of experience in the clandestine services, espionage, influence operations. How would you characterize what the Chinese Communist Party is doing in those parts of the battle space?
A massive and incredibly successful effort. Whoever's running their operations, I'm sure, has been receiving accolades and medals for many years. I mean, they're robbing us blind of our technology. We see increasingly evidence of connections between them and the people rioting in our streets. We see huge influence operations all over the United States that have been going on literally for decades. When I teach courses on this, I usually start by talking about the Manhattan Project. For a very brief snippet in time, we were the only nuclear power on the planet. In an incredibly short period of time, the Soviet Union acquired that weapon. They did that by stealing from us the results of all of that effort. Well, the Chinese are, in effect, attempting to do precisely the same thing to us all across the board, all day, every day. Everything we count on to give us that critical, decisive advantage, stealth technology, everything else, Just go steal it from the United States, and in record time on a shoestring budget, we can turn around and duplicate what you have. And I think they are dwarfing the success that the Russians ever had doing this. That alone is a critical threat to our national security.
But why are they talking it? The thing that bothers me, Vicky, is why did it take these people so long to come around to this? Why now?
Right. Well, and okay, that's why I wanted to go to McMaster's admission of global governance, because one of the global governing systems is a global network of universities and their research departments in their particular specialties. Okay, now when they started into this technological global governance system, they also talked about bridging the digital divide. Okay, and what they meant by that was that the vast majority of people in the world had no idea about computer systems and how systems worked. And so what they were planning and strategizing was that they needed, of course, to bring education about computers and networks and systems to people, to governments and people all around the world, so that we can have this big global utopia, a governing system of technology providing all of these wonders of the world to the rest of the world. So they opened up our universities for students all around the world to come in as a way of bridging the digital divide. So that's why we were flooded with students from India, from China, from the Soviet Union, from everywhere, because they were invited in to bridge the digital divide.
Yeah. Well, that's not something that I want.
Well, no, I was on a radio program the other day with Mark Windows, and he had a BBC reporter on there, and what I told him, he asked, what we should do about this, and I said, cut the fiber and close the borders. Yeah. We've got to get control back of our country.
I don't see them cutting the fiber. The problem is
they're not going to do it. That would be my solution.
Well, and that's the thing, is that the internet has bridged. There's so much now that's being. They've done their homework very well. As I look at ham radio, amateur radio, I see how some of the early technologies that they had at the time, going back several years ago, I think that what they wanted to do was create something like we had today with ham radio, because they talk about, as far as getting your, the purpose of ham radio is increasing international goodwill or something like that. It's radio transmissions and stuff that cross international borders. Now, obviously, there's a lot of limitations on what they can do with ham radio, so it didn't help to foment any kind of global governance. But certainly now with the internet, that's just taken so far off the charts as far as what the integration between peoples and between really economies. It is there's so much that would be destroyed if they isolated our country on the internet.
But
you'd have
human
industries.
Society is being destroyed. Western civilization is being destroyed. What's more important, a kid watching a YouTube video on something, anything, or
I know, for instance, like
civilized society?
Yeah.
Because what they are building with these global governing systems is a tyranny unlike anything that the world has ever seen. And once it gets a foothold, and I'm not sure that we're not already past that point, it's the end of freedom for humanity. It's total control by this alien condominium, this global governing system that they've built. by people that are so far removed from us.
Mm-hmm.
And what has it given us? It has given us all these billionaires that are destroying our society, our country.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't argue with that.
So I might sound very radical when I say cut the fiber, but damn, do you want you want enslavement forever?
The people would never stand for that. They love talking to other people, they love sharing their Instagram. They don't
understand
they don't understand
the stakes.
Hey, you can't cut the fiber because I'm trying to share the picture of the food that I ate earlier in the day on Instagram. And I want people around the world to be able... I want my friend in Singapore to be able to see the plate of food that I ate. I mean, this is what it's come to, Vicky.
Yeah.
The selfies.
Well, sometimes you have to say no to children,
Yeah, but they're adult children. In fact, we've become a society of adults.
They haven't grown up. If they can't, if you explain this to them, that here's the choice.
Oh, their eyes will glaze over.
You can have civilized society, or you can enslave your progeny forever. What do you want? What do you want?
Well, they don't care. They roll their eyes at you. Their eyes will glaze over. There you go again. There you go again, Vicky. Always being a downer. A downer Debbie. Have you ever seen that Saturday Night Live skit? The Downer Debbie?
Yeah, I know.
Wah, wah, wah.
That's true, I've had people call me and say, I don't know why I call.
There you go. Here it is.
Talk to you.
That's it. That's the sound you'll hear. Right? Every time you open your mouth, you'll hear that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know, because I've got it. I'm, Downer Darren. Anyway, continuing on. Another tactic they discussed was the ongoing upheaval. They mentioned this. They alluded to it in the first clip. The ongoing upheaval with the communist Black Lives Matter movement and Antifa. Let's not forget them. And they connected that activity with the communist Chinese, which I thought was very interesting, in light of the fact that we know that Patrisse Cullors, we played the audio on the show, did a whole interview about it, has come out and said that she was a Marxist, a trained Marxist. So this isn't even controversial to say that they are a communist organization. But they reference that in here.
One of the other things that's going on in our country, of course, at the moment is another technique that was identified in unrestricted warfare, namely street riots, upheavals that would both distract and perhaps achieve the ultimate goal of the Chinese Communist Party, which is, of course, the overthrow of our government and the collapse of our constitutional republic. There is some evidence, and I think you've been tracking it.
And by the way, good for him for not calling it a democracy.
Closely, of Chinese Communist Party involvement in some of the mayhem that has been taking place on the streets of American cities. How would you characterize that involvement, and how important has it been to the success of Maoist revolutionaries who are very prominently in the mix?
Yeah, well, the two of the founders of Black Lives Matter have admitted that they are trained Marxists. And of course, as trained Marxists, the kind of Marxism they were trained in is the Marxism of the Chinese communists, that is, Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics. We clearly see with Antifa and Black Lives Matter the Marxist hand. And, you refer to unrestricted warfare, but we can go back further to show how consistent the Chinese are in this. If we read Stalin's Foundations of Marxism, Leninism, or Foundations of Leninism, rather, all of this is described in his short book. He talks about internal revolution, where you rally the countries that have already fallen to the revolution in the former colonial countries into a giant coalition to attack imperialism from the outside, while you have an uprising, a revolution from within on the inside, and to try to coordinate those two things together at the same time. This Stalin describes in very simple terms the grand strategy of the communist project. And it looks like the CCP is following through on this idea Stalin described Marxism-Leninism not as a belief system, not as a faith, but as basically revolutionary theory, how to take over the world, how to make a global revolution, and to eradicate capitalism, to eradicate the United States as the center of global capitalism.
And once again, I have to say hello to all of the people in China, to the spooks that are on the stream constantly. They're all over everything we do, Vicky. And the Russians are there too, by the way. Why wouldn't they be? Because they're gathering intelligence on us, on the United States. So wouldn't it make sense to want to know what the people are thinking? And I think we're pretty representative of what normal people are thinking, anyway.
I don't know. I don't see that in my local community. The people that think like I do is rather spotty. But I want to point something out, that computer systems in general, they are compatible with the kind of totalitarian system that the communist Chinese have. Now, it doesn't look like it from the outside because of the distributed way that systems are implemented on the internet. But when you have a government or some entity that gathers data from all of the distributed systems, you have a single system. I don't care how many sites you have, subsidiary operations. If you can bring those systems together, the files together, and have it form a single system, then that is totally compatible with the communist Chinese way of government. So when you put all of these pieces together, they planned on a global governing system. They bridged the digital divide, bringing students from foreign countries into the United States to learn about all these systems. They started this color revolution in the United States to overturn our way of government. All of these pieces of the puzzle fit together into a picture that says they're trying to bring down the United States, and what will take its place is the communist Chinese system, because they have the most people to be able to manage a global system of government. They have 1/7 of the world's population, right? More than that. Mm-hmm. And so they have the population to run the global governing systems. And the leaders of this country better damn well figure this out pretty quick.
Well,
so when you consider what I said in the context of all of that, I don't see how what I said is so very radical.
No, it's not radical. They drill down a little more on the connections between Black Lives Matter and the Chinese Communist Party, which, it makes sense, folks, that you've got upheaval here, and you've got sworn enemies in another country. Now, whether or not Black Lives Matter themselves is being funded by Communist China, I wouldn't be a bit surprised, by the way. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there's direct funding taking place, but there doesn't have to be, because it's too easy to have a go-between. It's too easy to have somebody in between. And we've seen with George Soros doing these, funding these organizations. He puts money into other organizations that have 501c3s and they're tax exempt foundations, and then the money is distributed out from there to all these other subversive groups. So
well, we don't know. Maybe that's where Soros made all his money. Was working with the Chinese. We don't know.
There's a lot that we don't know. Anyway, getting back to the hearing.
And Sam, I think you've done some drilling down on some of the specific groups that are associated with, Antifa, quite obviously, but also with this Black Lives Matter organization. Can you shed any light on the CCP's direct contact with or support for those groups?
Right. Well, there is no question, as Jeff pointed out, that what we have here is most of the organizations that are in the street are clearly not just communists, not just Marxists, but have these Maoist tendencies, and we don't need to get lost in distinctions of different strains of communist ideology or thought, but there are some differences there. Beyond that, many of these groups go back for decades to having been pro-CCP, to having explicitly had Maoist thought, to being connected to that, and remain to this day to have very extensive contacts with the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government, and to clearly toe the Chinese Communist line. So, as an example, this Chinese Progressive Association, which has been very recently tied to Black Lives Matter financially, they are funneling money directly to a portion of the Black Lives Matter movement. There is no question, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that organization is a Chinese front organization, is a front for Chinese intelligence activity. It's part of what we would call worldwide the United Front, which is basically a massive influence operation run through front organizations worldwide. So that is not just an ideological connection. That's not just we kind of think the same thing. That is a direct connection to Beijing, from Beijing to things that are happening on the street. Now, how much money that is, I don't know yet. But that is a hard, concrete connection, and really shouldn't, frankly, be surprising to us, because consistent with what you guys have been talking about, this is the way the Chinese work, right? They work in multiple realms and in multiple dimensions and in multiple ways simultaneously. And for them, this conflict has been ongoing for a very long time. Just because we're not in a shooting war does not mean that they are not doing things hostile to us every day in any way that is possible.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's right on target, I'd say.
Yeah, I think he is too. And it makes perfect sense that you have an alignment of goals there between these terrorist organizations and the Communist Chinese Party, who want America to be destroyed because, death
by 1,000 cuts. What he said there, the Western way of war is you have like the soldiers, and you have the rules, and soldiers fight soldiers, but this asymmetric warfare and doing everything they can every place at any time to tear down our country, that is like full, total, all-out war.
Yeah.
And it includes civilians, obviously. And so the only way that you could fight, you've got to think above that. You've got to shut the borders. You've got to get all these students, all these foreign students, out of our universities. We have to go back to a system where we have universities that teach American students, period. I'll make them spend their money on their universities rather than being parasites on ours. And giving them the opportunity to make war on us on our own soil.
Yeah. It's you got to wonder what they have planned, with this, we talked a lot about the Transition Integrity Project and all of the violence that they're promising is going to happen, once the election takes place, if it doesn't go their way. And I don't think it will, because why would it? Why would it? They presented...
Who would ever vote for Joe Biden?
Well, and who would ever vote for Kamala Harris, right, knowing that she supports rioting? I've got another audio clip. I'll have to find it here in a second. But she's come out again and said Black Lives Matter is a great organization for change. Who would vote for something like that? You've got a group of people that are destroying cities. that are breaking storefronts, looting places everywhere they've went. And we keep hearing, they're peaceful protesters. Well, if they're peaceful protesters, why are people being beaten up and shot in the streets under the name of Black Lives Matter? You know what? If I had an organization, Vicky, and my organization was being used repeatedly by agents provocateur to be, giving them the benefit of a doubt. I'm not saying that, but let's just say we had an organization and we were going and doing truly peaceful protests. And everywhere we went, people were being beaten up, kicked, businesses were being burned down, whole cities were being wiped out. I think I would stop protesting for a while and figure out what the hell's going on. Because people are being damaged. But no, we don't have that here. Obviously, that's not what's taking place. Obviously, it's the organization. And when you look,
their mission is to destroy. So
when you look at even their website, and by the way, they've taken away some things on their website. I hear. I have not gone in there specifically to check it out, but what I've been hearing, we talked about how they had said something about their goal was to do away, and I forget exactly how they put it, with the nuclear family. I have heard, and again, I haven't went in and checked it out. I should have, but I didn't know I was going to mention this. Somebody said that they have been removing that. They took that off their website. So they have evidently been changing their mission statement because some of the words that they have posted in the past make them, it doesn't present that warm and fuzzy feeling that they want people. And obviously, nothing has been more destructive to the black population than the destruction of the nuclear family. I mean, nothing is more needed in I don't care who you are, what race you are. You need a good, strong male role model. And they have a lot of anti-patriarchal stuff on there. You need both the mother and the father in the home in order for a child to be well-rounded. I'm not saying people can't turn out properly without it, but it's a lot more difficult. I mean, this shouldn't even be controversial, except that today all kinds of things are controversial, which should really be unquestioned sanity. The fact that you don't hire pimps to do policing of the public might be in that category, Vicky.
Right, and you don't turn your police into social workers.
Yeah.
That's the other half of the Seattle story. You get a pimp to advise you how the police should function on the streets, and then you turn your police into castrated bicycle-riding social workers.
Yeah, and let's hire the human traffickers. That was one thing we didn't get to in that clip because we had the break and I didn't go back to it. But Tucker Carlson pointed out, he says, I'm a little confused. I don't understand. He says, pimps are human traffickers. So we're going to put human traffickers in charge of law enforcement. Think of how incredibly, stupid doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, actually, in point of fact, they're putting a person who will be a warlord.
Yes,
so,
the Chaz type. The very Chaz type people.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, they said he was involved in the whole Chaz thing, and that. Anyway, a little more on the organizations and their objectives.
It's my understanding that this Chinese Progressive Association actually has been shown to be tied to the diplomatic facilities of China in the United States. I don't know if you mentioned that, but address that if you would. And secondly, is the objective, as you best can judge it, to be of both Antifa and Black Lives Matter and other Maoist front groups like Freedom Road Socialist Organization and its splinter Liberation Road, which clearly were critical to the emergence of Black Lives Matter, the organization in the first place, that their object is revolution, not simply, social justice or, ending racial discrimination by the police and the like?
Right. So there is, to take your questions in reverse order, there is absolutely no ambiguity about the objectives of these organizations we're talking about. Explicitly, directly, we are talking about revolution. We are talking about the complete abolition, is one of the words they use quite frequently, of the existing political, economic, and social order. So we are not talking about just reforming the cops. We're talking about communist revolution. They are explicit about being communists as well. Yes, you are correct. Chinese Progressive Association has actually 2 chapters. One of them in Boston has extensive contacts with the Chinese consulate, just as an example of the kind of thing they do. They sponsor annually a raising of the Chinese Communist flag, the People's Republic flag, in the town square in Boston. That's one of their big activities. Hard to be more symbolic.
That would be calling a tell, I think, don't you think?
I would say that's a tell. In the trade, in San Francisco, one of the things that association has jumped on as of a couple of years ago was all of a sudden it has become very important to them to counter FBI efforts against Chinese espionage. They have stood up an entire organization to brand the arrest of any ethnic Chinese as a spy as being racist and to try to counter this. That's, again, a little bit of a tell. It's hard to be more transparent than that as soon as we began to turn the screws on Chinese intelligence in this country, all of a sudden these guys decided to create an entire movement to counter this and brand it as racist.
Yeah, so, and he mentioned the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. You dug up their website, frso.org. On their About page, they say that they are a national organization of revolutionaries fighting for socialism in the United States. They say our home is in the working class. FRSO members are rooted in the mass movement for justice, particularly in the labor movement and the movements of oppressed nations and nationalities, especially African Americans and Chicanos. We are also active in the immigrant rights, anti-war, students, and youth movements. We are organizing the United Front against monopoly capitalism with the strategic alliance of the multinational working class and oppressed nationality movements at its core. This is our general strategy for revolution in the U.S. FRSO is recruiting and building towards the creation of a new communist party based on Marxism-Leninism. This is necessary to lead the way to socialism and liberation. Our newspaper, Fight Back, is popular at protests, read by union workers and community activists, and can also be found at fightbacknews.org. So there you go, Freedom Road Socialist Organization.
And the significance of the word road in that organization, that is hugely significant because of the design of the transportation system. What they did was to open up our entire country and provide a means for, what's the word when you protect somebody? Protection for these people so that they could have, within jurisdictions, you could have port authorities that are not part of the local governing system. They are separate and apart. They're not state, they're not county, they're not city. They are sitting up in limbo as a regional organization unto itself, and they provided a way by specification of GATT, Article 5, where they could actually invade our country by way of the roads and zones under a port authority. So it's the design of the whole system. The whole system has been designed to facilitate this revolution and takedown of our country.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to leave that there for now until after the break, because we do have the break coming up. You know, they fired up all of this stuff again due to the Breonna Taylor murder. Well, I shouldn't say the word murder. Killing. It was an accident. The police came in. And everything we've been told about that has been a lie, too. But the media picks up the Black Lives Matter narrative and runs with it. So for many, many months, that's what we've been told, is basically it was a murder. You know, it was a police accident. The woman, her boyfriend was a drug dealer, apparently, supposedly, and that's why the police were there. But the whole thing was, they didn't charge the cops like the Black Lives Matter wanted them charged, and as a consequence, now we got to burn cities down again. Anyway, we got the top of the hour. We got to take the break. We'll be back in a moment.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
From FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the third and final hour of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It continues to be the 26th of September, 2020. Too many S's there. It's very hard to spit that out. I stumbled over that again. 26th of September, 2020. And we have a new show, but we are, in fact, not live at the moment. We will plan to be back on next week on live. But as I said, we had a prior engagement, so had to attend to that. So next week we plan on being back live if everything goes as planned. A lot going on, though, as you can hear. And certainly I mentioned the Breonna Taylor thing before the break. I just wanted to set the record straight because there's so much lies and deceptions going on right now with regard to everything. But, this thing has Tucker Carlson said it very well, has marinated, the lies have marinated for several months. Tell you what, let me just go ahead and real quickly deviate for a moment. He described the whole thing better than I could. And the facts are very important for people to understand. This woman's death was an unfortunate accident, but it certainly wasn't malicious at the hands of the police. And so I'll just let Tucker describe it real quickly here.
In Louisville tonight, a grand jury has issued its decision in the Breonna Taylor case. Rioters assembled immediately. They were already there waiting for it. The promise of potential violence tonight all began with a tragedy that took place 6 months ago. In March, 3 Louisville police officers served a search warrant at the apartment of a woman called Breonna Taylor. They knocked outside. They announced they were from the police department, and then they entered the apartment. Once they did, a man called Kenneth Walker opened fire on them. Walker was Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. He was also supposedly a drug dealer. That's one of the reasons the police were there. Walker admits that he fired first and that he shot a police officer. In response, the cops fired back. By the time Kenneth Walker surrendered, Breonna Taylor, who was in another room in the apartment, had been fatally wounded. Those are the facts of the case. It's a very sad story. Nobody disputes that. But the truth was not enough for BLM. BLM seeks political power. It's a political organization. In order to get that power, they need to keep America angry and divided, Americans divided against each other. So BLM lied about how Breonna Taylor died. BLM activists claim that Louisville police broke into Taylor's apartment without warning. They claim cops used a so-called no-knock warrant to surprise Taylor while she was sleeping, and then they shot her. They described her killing as a murder, yet another horrifying example of systemic racist violence against African Americans by the police. That's what they said. It was a lie. But because BLM said it, virtually no one challenged their version of it. And many responded to that version. This summer, Louisville City Council unanimously passed something called Breonna's Law. It banned no-knock raids. In Washington, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul introduced the so-called Justice for Breonna Taylor Act. That would ban federal no-knock warrants. All of those responses were based on a story that at its most basic level was not true. This summer, a tenant in Breonna Taylor's apartment complex told the New York Times he heard police officers shout "police" and then knock 3 times before they entered her apartment. That was all but ignored. Today, the Attorney General of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, confirmed that it's true. There is, he said, uncontested evidence from an independent citizen witness that despite what BLM has claimed for half a year, police were not, in fact, executing a no-knock warrant on Breonna Taylor's apartment.
Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant.
So there you have it. The facts of the case are not what we were told they were, because real life is always more complicated than political propaganda. There is no evidence of any kind that Breonna Taylor was murdered because she was black. That is a lie. It's a lie designed to divide the country and make the people telling it more powerful. Instead, it seems clear that Taylor was shot accidentally because her boyfriend opened fire on the police in a dark apartment, and he may have done that accidentally. Yet in the end, the facts of the case didn't matter. BLM's version had marinated unchallenged for 6 months. The mob had assembled in Louisville, abetted by a reckless media and paid by someone. As the grand jury prepared its decision, Louisville girded for war. They knew what was coming. So authorities declared a state of emergency. Police blocked roads, businesses nailed plywood over their windows, even the local children's hospital boarded up its entrance. The doctors and nurses inside knew they were not safe from the mob. Today the grand jury finally announced its decisions. Here it is. One officer, a man called Brett Hankison, has been indicted on 3 counts of wanton endangerment. Hankison was not charged with shooting and killing Breonna Taylor. Instead, the grand jury found that by firing 10 rounds, Hankison may have acted recklessly. Keep in mind, Hankison only fired his gun after one of his partners had been shot by Kenneth Walker. So should Hankison not have returned fire? How many rounds is a cop allowed to discharge once someone starts shooting at him? No one answered those questions. And in fact, it's hard to believe we'd be having conversations this absurd, much less discussing Officer Hankison's indictment, if Biden voters weren't in the streets making threats and demanding it. In other words, the mob is now in charge of our justice system. They're clearly having an influence on it in Louisville and in other cities. What kind of country is that? But the mob wants more. One indictment and yet another fake hate crime isn't enough. They want blood. Watch. Get ready to die, he says to the cop. Who says that? A terrorist says that. Get ready to die.
Anyway, I'll cut out there. But the point is that the facts matter. Facts matter, except that to terrorists, facts don't matter. And the media are the lapdogs for the terrorists.
Right. Okay, now given those facts, given the facts of the McCluskey case, given the facts of that young kid in Kenosha?
Yeah. Oh.
What we're seeing across the country is that the mob is being empowered. Where is the FBI? What has Trump done? There's obviously an insurrection going on.
Yeah.
Right? And the Durham report is important, but that's the Ukraine. You know, that's investigating another part of it. Where is our law enforcement to protect our country? They're missing in action.
Yeah, it's there you go. That's exactly what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, and this is kind of what getting back to the national security panel that we were playing a moment ago. This is kind of what they're talking about. How do we meet this challenge? How do we, what can we do? The question.
Oh, what can we do? What can we do? Let's all wring our hands.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing at this point in time, because that's all we're left to do. Where is the Department of Justice and the FBI? They're asking that too.
Just picking up on your last point, Sam, and then I'd like to get both of you to sort of lay out what we should be doing in the face of this kind of threat. Sam, just your question that came out of what you just said, where is the FBI with all of this going on inside America, the enemy within? Have they been essentially scared off or rendered ineffectual by these, uses of racism and deflection?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most succinct way to put it. I mean, as an old CIA guy, I'm probably obligated to say something snarky about the Bureau, but all kidding aside and professional rivalry aside, the Bureau knows what it's doing. It has a tremendous number of good folks. It destroyed the KKK. It destroyed the traditional Italian mafia in New York City. It can certainly handle a bunch of 25-year-old Antifa types from Willamette University in Oregon, or these self-described revolutionaries in Black Lives Matter. But it is not allowed to, as best I can tell from talking to Bureau personnel. And that has been the case for many years, that if you attempt to get the Department of Justice to come on board with investigating one of these organizations, no way. I mean, back in 2010, just very briefly, one of the big organizations involved here is Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Mm-hmm. They are a Maoist revolutionary communist organization that's gone through the usual name changes over the years. Back in 2010, the Bureau busted a whole bunch of those guys, served something like 50 search warrants, and was poised to tear the heart out of it. Not a single prosecution ever took place. Not one of those guys ever saw the inside of a courtroom. DOJ shut everything down. Very hard to believe.
Obama administration.
During the Obama administration, and there's certainly very strong suggestions that part of the problem was that some of the folks at the upper levels in Freedom Road were way too close to people in the Obama administration. But regardless, there's no question, Department of Justice proceeded on not a single prosecution. Not just they didn't convict anybody, they never tried to convict anybody. They never prosecuted him. And I think that lesson is learned across a big organization, right? Okay, I'm not wasting years of my life and then probably having my career destroyed because I looked in the wrong place.
Yeah, it's much safer to be looking for those vaunted white supremacists rather than these revolutionaries, or for that matter, the Sharia supremacists who also largely got a pass during the Obama years. Jeff, let me come to you. What would you recommend, in addition to obviously getting the FBI back in business, and not just on the revolutionary side, but also in really countering the theft of technology and understanding the magnitude of the threat it's posing to us, the Communist Party? What else should we be doing that we're not, and how urgently should we be doing it?
Well, we need to disengage from China. We cannot have these corrupting economic relationships, and we have to divorce our economic system from theirs. And we have to make sure that treason and the ideological subversion of our system is countered. We have to make officials responsible for looking the other way, as the example that we've just heard from Sam. We can't have the Justice Department not prosecuting communist criminals who are trying to subvert the system. We have to follow through. We have to stop the subversion of our system. We have to prevent our economy from being penetrated to the extent that, in a free system, the people who have money, the big corporations, the billionaires, if they're in bed with our enemies, that just completely subverts even our political process.
Okay, so that's the clip, and it's rare that I actually agree with think tanks so much, but so much of what they said in that discussion, I can't argue with any of it. In fact, they sound a lot like us.
Yeah,
it's astounding that this treason is going on, and nothing's being done about it. But one thing I will say that I do disagree with is I think it goes much deeper than just that the FBI is afraid of being labeled racist. I'm reminded of the Govern America show that you and I did back on June 13th of this year, Vicky. We played audio from Diana West. She had written a book about all of these players in the FBI who had communist leanings. And James Comey was one of them. He's written things and he referenced things from his past that he admired, which tells you a lot about his worldview, at least at the time. Now, sometimes people change their worldview, but often they don't. And in his case, I highly doubt he has. And certainly his actions.
If you're acting on your worldview as an adult, your worldview is set.
Yeah. Well, at the time he was a young James Comey, as she refers to it. But he was an adult at the time. She named off several people, though, inside the agency, in high-ranking positions, as I recall. And I'll put the link in the show notes for people that want to go back and listen to that show. That's, again, June 13th of this year. I'm afraid the agencies have infiltrated with communists. It stands to reason that if James Comey has communist leanings, he was the head of the FBI, that certainly, more than likely, he's placed key people inside the agency who have the same views and are still working. And this is what we mean by the term deep state, by the way, because you can change presidents, you can change office holders, and they'll change a certain number of cabinet positions. But you still have the underlying people from previous administrations within these agencies. And they have a lot of power because they're in key positions. They should be apolitical and fair and doing what's right for our country. But when you get subversives inside those agencies, you've got a big problem. And I think that's a lot of what we have today.
Right.
We have a lot of infiltration.
It's been going on for like 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've said before, I think, they need to get rid of about 3 layers of leadership in the FBI and promote somebody, shiny new FBI agents that were police officers before that out of the FBI Academy and turn them loose to be law enforcement. But they have to get them out of the political situation that they're in under the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
As long as they're under the Department of Justice and directly tied to the Department of Home Scam Security, they will not be allowed to do their job.
Yeah, President Trump designated the cities of New York, Seattle, and Portland as anarchist zones. That's a step toward cutting federal funding, since they aren't doing what's necessary to stop the violent mobs. So the local NBC-owned and operated station in New York offered this, in my opinion, very biased report on the matter.
An anarchist jurisdiction. That's a term we started this Monday with. We tried to find out more. This is a term now that the Justice Department has used to label New York and 2 other cities today. That designation comes with a new threat from the federal government. The mayor and the governor, though, wasted no time firing back at Washington. News 4 investigative reporter Sarah Wallace live in the Bronx with this latest clash now between the city and the Trump administration. Sarah?
Well, and David, the mayor and the governor definitely on the same page on this one. Their reactions fast and furious. They are united in their stance that they will take the Trump administration to court if necessary. This summer's looting in New York City and similar instances in Portland and Seattle, prompting the Department of Justice to smack the three cities with an anarchist jurisdiction title, claiming they, quote, have permitted violence and destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract criminal activities. The mayor today pounced.
This is just another one of President Trump's games. It's thoroughly political. It's part of his campaign strategy. It makes no sense. It's not based in the facts in the least. It's insulting to the people of New York City. And his effort to withhold our funding is unconstitutional.
The financial stakes are what's at issue here. New York City communities get billions of dollars.
Wait a minute. Is there some constitutional obligation that the federal government fund states and cities?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it started out.
No, I don't think so either. So he's lying.
In federal grant money every year. President Trump now directing agencies to come up with a plan to minimize funding. It's not the first time the administration has targeted New York City.
A couple of years ago, they said sanctuary cities would not get federal criminal justice monies, the burn jag monies. And we said it was illegal and unconstitutional. We sued them, and we won.
In justifying its move, the DOJ cited the city's rising gun violence, cuts to the NYPD's budget, and the refusal of district attorneys to prosecute peaceful protesters. Shavonna Newsom.
Peaceful protesters. Are they peaceful, Vicky?
I don't think so.
No.
But you know what? The thing is that we know that there are connections between those cities and foreign entities. That's why they're sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
Because they've loaded up their cities with illegals, and they are colluding with foreign governments. You know, on the Pacific side, it's China. On the Atlantic side, you know, it might be Ukraine and Russia. I don't know. But the thing is that taking away their federal money is not going to solve the problem.
I think Russia gets blamed for a whole lot of stuff that they have nothing to do with. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think you're probably right, but that's you know, whoever it is that they're colluding with in New York. The thing they all three of those have in common is that they're all port cities. They are part of the global system, and taking away the federal money just means that they will go to China to get funding. It won't hurt them, and so even though they whine about it,
well, they'll do that anyway. I mean, let's face it, and a lot of people have pointed out a lot of the reason why. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about how much money the media takes from China and how much of a stake they have in the United States media, which would explain a lot. I haven't run that down, but that would certainly explain a lot. That's an area of research that I need to get into.
Yeah. Well, and they also allowed our media to be consolidated into, I think, probably what is now about 3 corporations that own all of the media.
Yeah.
And so it's consolidated, it's monopoly. It's not news and information, it's propaganda.
Propaganda is live and well.
But the thing is, if you want, that's what drives me crazy about our government, the way that they operate. The solutions that they offer are never the solutions. The solution is never the real solution that would work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a money solution in the case where our country is being taken down by radicals is not the solution.
Well,
I don't know.
The money solution they're offering is designed to control the population, which has been the goal all along. And
well, but taking money away from the city that they supposedly need.
I see what you're saying.
For the police and to run the city.
Yeah.
That's not a solution. That's not a solution to rioters and revolutionaries taking over our cities.
Well, and
the revolutionaries have their own money.
You got to get rid of the rot, and the rot is coming from the top, in this case.
Yes. Yes, and so Trump's solution in that, the Department of Justice solution, is it's not. It won't work.
At best, they're completely
useless. Which makes me think that that's really the real reason, because these are not stupid people. They're not stupid. You know, they can think as well as I can. If I can see that it won't work because of these foreign connections, they sure as hell can.
Yeah, they know what's going on. They know what's going on. They have to. I mean, they got the best intelligence operation in the world.
Theoretically.
Well, it's good at finding out stuff. It's not so good necessarily at relaying all the information.
Or acting on it.
They're very good at cloak and dagger operations, which is, I believe, what a lot of this is, more than likely. But anyway, as we continue on.
ED's budget and the refusal of district attorneys to prosecute peaceful protesters. Shavonna Newsom is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York and has led many of those protests.
She's led many of these peaceful protesters.
Violence is coming from the NYPD with the backing of the police unions in their head, Pat Lynch, to help the Trump narrative. This is nothing but fear-mongering. It's another Trump trap. Trump is trying to win votes in this country, and he thinks by showing violent interactions with police departments and people, and by enforcing and defunding communities that need it, like New York State, that it's going to make more people vote for him.
The mayors of Seattle and Portland also weighed in, saying this is absolutely unconstitutional and accusing the president of cheap political games. Live from the hybrid section, Sarah Wallace, News 4 New York.
I find it interesting how she talked to Black Lives Matter people, but she didn't talk to anybody from the administration. She didn't seek, she could have very easily taken a trip over to the police department, talked to the local police, or the FBI's office. I'm sure they have an office there. But no, total biased report. What can we expect from NBC? One American News, though, at least they'll talk about the real source of all of this.
Well, billionaire George Soros is planning to donate more than $200 million toward organizations seeking racial equality in America. According to reports this week, $220 million is set to be funneled through his Open Society Foundation's organization and will be distributed throughout the next 5 years. $150 million will go towards grants for groups like Black Lives Matter, and another $70 million for criminal justice reform and efforts to fight voter suppression. Soros is known for reportedly paying people to participate in protests and using his wealth to push liberal policies in the U.S.
So there you go. And I found that clip.
Yeah, and so let's just don't do anything about that,
no,
right?
Right.
Let's just not give money to the cities.
Yeah.
It makes me crazy, I swear.
Well, speaking of crazy, here's Kamala Harris.
We really ought to know the power that we have in every place and never decide that any one place is excluded from us being there to get the kind of change we want, right? Mm-hmm. So I made the decision to go up the rough side of the mountain, to go inside the system. Mm-hmm. But I also understand, the brilliance of being outside of the system when you have the brilliance of Black Lives Matter and that movement and what it has done to force change. So there you go.
So despite her efforts at trying to distance herself, she just can't help but praise the brilliance of this terrorist organization.
Well, they're winning, and our government is helping them all they can. So.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, we got the, let's go ahead and take the bottom of the hour break, and we'll hit the ground running when we come back. We haven't even got into the report about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and all of that stuff out of the Senate Finance Committee. So lots more to do. Final half hour of Govern America straight ahead, folks. Don't go away.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're in the home stretch of the broadcast. One more half hour to go, and we're heading off to the sunset. GovernAmerica.com is the website. And by the way, we plan on being back next week live. GovernAmerica.com is where you can find all the news and information of the week, and also past broadcasts on demand. here if you want to go back in time and listen to whatever we were talking about in a previous era. So governamerica.com. Vicky, go ahead and give your information out, please.
Yeah, my website is thetechnocratictyranny.com. My email address is eyeswideopen@channelingreality.com, and channelingreality.com is the name of my old website, where I have lots of research still posted.
All right, very good. So check out all her very important information. And, we mentioned earlier that the report came out. Johnson, Grassley, they released a press release. U.S. Senators Ron Johnson, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, released a report that revealed millions of dollars in questionable financial transactions between Hunter Biden and his associates and foreign individuals, including the wife of the former mayor of Moscow and individuals with ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Gee, are we starting to sense a little pattern here, Vicky?
Yeah, everywhere you look, there's a pattern. It's all patterned. It's playbook. It's
if we had a real media in here, this guy wouldn't even have a chance of being a candidate. But no. It's all. Well, here's a Fox News rundown with some of the charges, some of the things. They're talking about this report here.
And we want to get right into the Senate report released yesterday looking at the Joe Biden family's ties to Ukraine and China. The GOP issued report found that Hunter Biden's financial transactions with Ukrainian, Russian, Kazakh, and Chinese nationals raised criminal concerns. The report also finds that the former vice president's office and State Department officials were aware of Hunter Biden accepting money from these countries, but ignored the concerns relating to Hunter Biden's role on the board of Burisma. Joining me right now is Wisconsin Senator and Chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, Ron Johnson. Some of these payouts are just stunning, like the money that the former wife of the former mayor of Moscow sent to Hunter Biden. I don't know what that was about, but let's go through the report and please go through the key findings.
We never sought to target or go after the Bidens. They put themselves in the middle of this with Hunter's glaring and obvious conflict of interest joining the board of Burisma. So this happened just a couple months after Ukraine had their revolution of dignity, which is really all about ridding Ukraine of corruption. And here we set up this glaring conflict of interest where Hunter Biden was paid $4.2 million. He and his business partner and his businesses, $4.2 million over about 30 months. Now that calculates about $140,000 a month, almost $1.7 million per year. It's a pretty good gig if you've got the right last name. And let's face it, this was all about Volochevsky, the owner of Burisma, trying to gain influence so that the charges, the investigations against him in Ukraine would be dropped. One thing that's kind of notable is in George Kent's interview before our committee, he pointed out that a $7 million bribe was paid by Volochevsky, by Burisma, to make those investigations go away 7 months after Hunter Biden and Devin Archer joined the board of Burisma. And remember, Hunter Biden joined the board supposedly to consult on corporate governance and transparency. Didn't do a particularly good job. But then you hop to Russia, $3.5 million paid to Elena Baturina, the former wife of the now deceased former mayor of Moscow. She's Russia's lone woman billionaire or a woman billionaire in Russia. We have a very strange payment from Kazakhstan, $142,000 to buy a car for Devin Archer. And then the millions of cash flow between the intricate web of corporate dealings with the Chinese nationals that have current connections to the communist government and former affiliations with the People's Liberation Army, helping arrange, for example, the purchase by and the control by Chinese business of a U.S. dual parts auto manufacturer. The type of equipment could be used for military purposes by the PLA. Again, it's such an extensive web. There's so many millions of dollars flowing back and forth with those associations. We've just only uncovered. I think we're only scratching the surface. We have no guarantee that we've uncovered it all. We just have really laid out a pretty troubling web that represents potential conflict of interest, counterintelligence, and extortion risks to a Biden administration.
Do you have evidence that, in fact, policy was changed by the Biden vice president or the Obama-Biden administration in conjunction with these payouts to Hunter Biden?
Well, first of all, it's hard to find smoking guns. It's even more difficult when you can't get the documents even out of an administration or the State Department that is supposedly controlled by a Republican president. The problem is his political appointees are at the top of the organization, but just right below that top layer, you still have people loyal to Biden's that know where the balls are hidden, and they've done a pretty good job hiding the balls. But let's face it, these types of transactions require approval. Approvals through CFIUS, sometimes involve the Secretary of State, and those approvals were given to some of these transactions. That is what is so troubling about this is we don't know the full extent of all these financial transactions, and we need to dig into it.
Yes, it definitely needs to be dug into. But Joe Biden, for himself, he's claiming, of course, there's no evidence of any impropriety with his son.
Every single solitary, serious investigator, including your network and others, have looked at this, have said there's absolutely zero basis to the accusation that I acted any way inappropriately or that my son did. Every major national, international, and local news operation that's looked into it has said it's a lie. This is the president who's flat lying. So there's not been a scintilla of evidence pointing out that anything is wrong. There's not a single solitary scintilla of evidence anywhere. There's not been one scintilla of evidence that my son ever interfered, that I ever asked me anything, that I ever got involved in anything. I mean, come on. Come on.
So
these guys are amazing.
So you think that everything that happened was kosher?
There's not one single bit of evidence. Not one little tiny bit. To suggest anything done was wrong. You know that.
Not a scintilla, Vicky. Not a scintilla. But hey, before we go on,
a dump truck full.
He said there's no evidence, but let's go back and hear Joe Biden himself, his own words. Here's your evidence, Mr. Biden.
It just happened to be that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones, so I got Ukraine and. I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no. I said,
the state prosecutor, by the way, that was investigating Hunter Biden, he conveniently leaves that out.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
So somebody that wouldn't look into Hunter Biden. So there's your scintilla of evidence. Just a little tip of a very large iceberg, Mr. Biden.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to spend the next week really looking into that. It's interesting to me that it started with car parts. And car parts are, of course, important when you're talking about an fully automated highway system, and that being the center of the global conspiracy, the core, if you will, of the global governance conspiracy.
Yes, indeed. I think one thing that's very clear from this whole show, there is no shortage of corruption in the United States. That is for sure.
And it makes me sick. But the truth is that it's from top to bottom. This whole conversion to a global governing system has corrupted our entire governing structure.
One thing I mentioned in here, too, is, like the New York Post is reporting, Hunter Biden allegedly sent thousands of dollars to people who appear to be involved in the sex industry. according to Wednesday's report released by Senate Republicans. The report claims unspecified records show that Biden, quote, has sent funds to non-resident alien women in the United States who are citizens of Russia and Ukraine, and who subsequently wired funds they have received from Hunter Biden to individuals located in Russia and Ukraine. The records also note that some of the transactions are linked to what appears to be an Eastern European prostitution or human trafficking ring, unquote. So
yeah, I wonder how many men.
Maybe we could smuggle some of those in here and police our cities, Vicky.
Uh-huh.
Maybe the pimps could be policing our cities. Maybe Biden was just trying to work on this new policing project.
That's an interesting connection you just made there.
Yeah.
The pimp in Seattle and Biden running a sex trafficking ring. That's most interesting, Darren.
Well, we got a plan for our future pimp police. Our future pimp police.
Oh God.
Yeah. So civil unrest unbounds. It's everywhere. A lot of people have become unstable and deranged. Where is all the crazy coming from? Well, someone put together a montage of Wednesday's The Morning Joe show on MSNBC. This is really good. All of these references to Trump are all on Wednesday's show, this past Wednesday, one single show.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I don't know. We won't call them fascist comments. Fascism. Fascist. Call fascism. Fascism is fascist. Fascist
notions of fascism. Xenophobic, racist, demagogic, racist, sexist, xenophobic, autocratic, and fascistic. Donald Trump is a fascist.
Someone like a fascist or a tyrant or an autocrat.
Fascist rhetoric. Fascist language. Fascists.
I'm glad that you're starting talking about fascism. Hitler.
Right. Fascist rhetoric. He's talking the way fascists talk. It's autocratic. Fascist. Nazi Germany. Before the rise of Hitler, fascist language.
To Hitler, fascist, Hitler. Adolf Hitler.
Hitler. But Hitler.
From what Adolf Hitler preached in the early 30s. Let's just say it once and for all.
You can tell they really love Trump, don't they?
Yeah. You know what drives me crazy about Mika? She always whines.
Yeah.
She always, you know what? I just like to say to her, release your inner bitch. Let it out.
Here's a show title.
Stop whining.
Let's see, I'll have to ponder whether we can name the show Release Your Inner Bitch. Well, of course, the left is being programmed to hate. That's very clear. They're tuning in to MSNBC, CNN. They're believing the lies. It's making them crazy. And you're talking about people whining. This was Art posted this in the chat room last week. But it's when I clicked on this, I mean, you can't help but laugh. But it could be a setup, but I don't think so. This is exactly how crazy they get. We mentioned the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg last week. Many hours of talking head time this week was devoted to how Republicans shouldn't wait until the election to fill the seat because it's an election year. How dare they fill such an important position? I don't see how this is even controversial. Trump is the sitting president. He has a right and duty to fill the seat. But the whining of the left is off the charts, Vicky. Here's a couple of examples.
Holy you guys! I'm driving your car, but I just got a notification that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died! Could this year get any worse? Ruth, you just had to make it to 2021!
She let go a little too far.
Yeah. That is taking whining to an extreme. Here, and the meltdowns just keep on coming.
God! To people that are pro-life! I f***ing hate you! Why can't women have abortions? I just saw a f***ing pro-life sign driving down the f***ing road having a mental breakdown! And I was trying to say, all you people you're so f***ing stupid! Ugh! This sign says, I could feel pain before I was born! It's a baby! Bitch, I was born and I can feel pain! I wish I wasn't f***ing born! Stop bringing these because you're pro-birth. You're f***ing stupid. And I wish I had been f***ing aborted. Oh, my God.
So, with that kind of brilliant display, it really does make you a little pessimistic for the future. That's the people that are in charge tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It's really quite frightening. But the Democrats talked about packing the court. There's been a lot of talk this week about packing the court. Very important topic. You know, of course, packing the court, advancing beyond the number nine, beyond that number to more people, putting more people on the court. This has been talked about repeatedly over the years, and it hasn't been done. Of course, there's the obvious, where do you stop once you start doing that? You know, you're just going to keep adding more and more people, and you're going to have a court of 50 or more on the Supreme Court. Anyway, there's been a lot of talk about this week because Trump has a very good likelihood that he's going to get another person on the court. And they're freaking out about this. But, you know, Clarence Thomas has talked about how he wants to be able to retire. So he was just waiting. You know, in fact, I guess there's been discussion about who would be able to be the next to retire. But I guess he wants to retire anyway. So the likelihood that the conservatives are going to have that big of a margin is kind of overblown anyway. But here's some discussion from, I believe, the media. You know, they're egging on this whole idea of the need to pack the court.
If the Republicans manage to essentially steal a second Supreme Court seat, the only way that we restore...
Now, she uses the term steal. There's no theft here. Trump is the duly elected president of the United States, and the Senate is duly elected by the people. There's no theft of a seat here.
Fairness is for Congress to pass an act expanding the court.
Do you say Democrats, if they get back the Senate in this election in November, should then move to expand the Supreme Court?
Are you in favor of trying to expand the numbers of justices on the Supreme Court?
Like the idea of eliminating the filibuster. Should they do that?
As you know, some Democrats are openly threatening to try to pack the Supreme Court with additional justices. Would you agree with that?
Potentially changing the number of justices in the court, changing the filibuster, changing the number of states in the union.
Adding seats to the Supreme Court and getting rid of the filibuster. Do you support those two things?
You know, there is nothing in the Constitution that says there has to be 9 Supreme Court justices.
One response from the Democrats might be to pack the court.
What we'll do is very simple. We'll add D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. That's 4 new senators. We'll add 2 new Supreme Court justices.
Will they really add the 2 seats?
Why wouldn't they?
Because they're weak and they're wimps and they're afraid.
Okay, so, with all this talk about how, another thing that they've talked about, Vicky, is this notion that, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her dying wish was that that Trump wouldn't be able to pick her replacement. So that we have to honor her dying wish. So that means Trump needs to wait until after the election, to be able to...
You know what? We don't need to do anything. I heard a caller call into Washington Journal the other morning, and she was talking the same kind of thing of diversity on the court as if the court is a representative body. These people don't understand the purpose of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They think it's just another representative body. It should be reflective of the United States as a whole. Under that theory, we could have a 1,000-member Supreme Court.
Well, the Supreme Court is not supposed to be, and this is why it's a lifetime appointment, it's not supposed to be partisan one way or the other. They're supposed to fairly judge what the Constitution says. In other words, interpret the Constitution based upon its merits. In other words, not skew it. What did the Founding Fathers intend in the language there? And they're not supposed to be activist either way. They're supposed to be impartial, and they're supposed to not lean. I mean, they're supposed to be above all of that, is my point.
What is the law, and what are the facts in this
dispute?
Case?
Yeah, they're designed. It's supposed to be just for disputes over constitutional language, not going out of our way to interpret it one way or another and twist it. Interpret, yes, based upon the historical context of what the Founding Fathers intended with the language, but not to twist it in any way. And that seems to have completely gotten lost in the debate, as so many things do. But, this notion that we need to respect Ruth Bader Ginsburg's last wishes and packing the court is a thing to do. Well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if you're going to respect her wishes, why don't we listen to exactly what she herself said about packing the court?
There is no fixed number in the Constitution, so this court has had as few as 5, as many as 10. 9 seems to be a good number, and it's been that way for a long time. I have heard that there are some people on the Democratic side who would like to increase the number of judges. I think that was a bad idea when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried to pack the court. His plan was for every justice who stays on the court past the age of 70, the president would have authority to nominate another justice. If that plan had been effective, the court's number would have swelled immediately from 9 to 15, and the president would have 6 appointments to make. You mentioned before the court appearing partisan. Well, if anything would make the court appear partisan, it would be that. One side saying, when we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number of judges, so we will have more people who will vote the way we want them to. So I am not at all in favor of that solution to what I see as a temporary situation. I mean, the president is term limited, so the president can't make that many appointments, and then there'll be a new administration. That administration will have appointments to make.
Okay, so there you go. You want to respect the dying woman's wish? Drop this idea of packing the court. And it's also interesting that Obama faced a similar situation. It was back in 2016, it was the Republicans making the argument that the Democrats are making today. Everything has seemed to switch around. So this whole week has been kind of a situation where one side was playing old clips from the other side and vice versa. Here's Obama himself back in 2016 arguing against the notion that the president ought not to be able to pick the Supreme Court replacement in an election year. And he was right back then.
The American people deserve a fully staffed court of 9.
Sorry, that's the wrong clip. Here is the Obama clip.
When there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court, the President of the United States is to nominate someone. The Senate is to consider that nomination, and either they disapprove of that nominee or that nominee is elevated to the Supreme Court. Historically, this has not been viewed as a question. There's no unwritten law that says that it can only be done on off years. That's not in the constitutional text. I'm amused when I hear people who claim to be strict interpreters of the Constitution suddenly reading into it a whole series of provisions that are not there. There is more than enough time for the Senate to consider in a thoughtful way the record of a nominee that I present and to make a decision. We're going to find somebody who is an outstanding legal mind, somebody who cares deeply about our democracy and cares about rule of law.
Somebody who knows we're not a democracy.
The American people...
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave that there, but the point is Obama's arguing the same thing, back in 2016 when it suited him. Now, one final clip, and then we'll have to head for the hills. Here's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, was arguing that the same thing, that the Supreme Court, when you're having an election year, it doesn't matter. The American people deserve 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and Obama should fill the seat. What's changed? It's amazing what a difference 4 years can make.
The American people deserve a fully staffed court of 9.
The president nominates, and then the Senate advises and consents or not, but they go forward with the process.
What we're seeing here, and I hope this is temporary, is a disrespect for the Constitution.
The Constitution is 100% clear. The President of the United States has the right to nominate someone to be a justice of the Supreme Court. Senate's function is to hold hearings and to vote.
The blockade on filling a naturally occurring vacancy, in my view, is harmful to the independence of the Article III branch.
You cannot keep a seat on the Supreme Court, which represents all of it. You cannot keep it vacant against the Constitution.
Do pretty much everything they can to avoid acknowledging the legitimacy of our democratically elected president.
The American people expect the president's nominee to be given a fair hearing and a timely vote in the Senate.
Every day that goes by without a 9th justice is another day the American people's business is not getting done.
I say to you, do your job. Vote for a Supreme Court nominee.
Instead of just saying the blanket rule is no matter who you are, no matter what your qualifications, because you were sent by this president, we will create a unique rule for you and refuse to entertain you.
One of the most important consequences of who is president of the United States is who sits on the United States Supreme Court.
If you want to stop extremism in your party, you can start by showing the American people that you respect the President of the United States and the Constitution.
The American people deserve a fully staffed court of 9.
What a difference 4 years can make, isn't it?
That was fun.
I think we could have lived without that horrible music under it, but other than that, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it, folks. We're out of time. We'll be back live next week if things go as planned. Thanks as always, Vicky.
Thank you, Darren. It was fun.
It's always fun, always fast. Folks, pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. Spread the message about the broadcast and join us back here next week. God bless you, folks. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.